Hello YouTube, by Kohanam here. Today I'm going to talk about one of the coolest themes in all of Yu-Gi-Oh! And show you a deck that I've been using in that theme. The theme I'm talking about is the Valkyries, which was used by Siegfried von Schroeder in the original animated series. One of the reasons it's so cool is because it has a card that's unlike any other card in the entire game, and that card is Mischief of the Time Goddess. Mischief of the Time Goddess skips your opponent's entire turn and takes you directly to the battle phase of your next turn. That means anything that would have happened during your opponent's skipped turn, or even anything that would have happened during the portions of your own skipped turn, are just skipped over and will never happen. Did your opponent have a Destiny Hero, Destroyer, or Phoenix Enforcer that was supposed to come back to his field in the end phase? It won't come back if you use Mischief of the Time Goddess to skip that end phase. Was your opponent's Mirror Jade, the Iceblade Dragon, supposed to destroy all of your monsters in the end phase that you destroyed it? That won't happen if you skip that part of your turn using Mischief of the Time Goddess. Is your opponent's Lord of the Heavenly Prison protecting their face-down spelling trap cards? Use Mischief of the Time Goddess to skip their turn, go to your next turn, and then use Harpie's Feather Duster to destroy those cards when they're no longer protected. Is your damage reduced by the effect of your Pot of Prosperity or Dark Ruler No More? If you use Mischief of the Time Goddess to skip to the battle phase of your next turn, none of your damage will be reduced because you'll no longer be under those effects. There are so many strange interactions that come up when you use Mischief of the Time Goddess. I feel like I'm discovering more every time I play. That's part of what makes it so fun to use. I'll put a link down in the description to one duel I had where my opponent pulled off a combo involving Afterglow that they're trying to do, and then they get completely obliterated when their turn is skipped by Mischief of the Time Goddess. Now that I've talked about why someone would play a Valkyrie deck using Mischief of the Time Goddess, I'll talk about the deck itself that I've been using. Ride of the Valkyries and Mischief of the Time Goddess is the 1-2 punch of the deck. Ride of the Valkyries lets you special summon as many monsters as you want with different names that are Valkyries from your hand. Ride of the Valkyries also has a couple of bonus effects. If you special summon 3 or more Valkyries from your hand with its effect, you can't take damage from battle until the end of your opponent's next turn, which makes you virtually untouchable. More importantly, you can banish Ride of the Valkyries from your graveyard to add the Mischief of the Time Goddess Quick Play spell card from your deck to your hand, and you can even do this during the turn that you send your Ride of the Valkyries to the graveyard. That pretty much guarantees that you'll be able to use Mischief of the Time Goddess on the same turn that you use Ride of the Valkyries. Ride of the Valkyries does have a drawback that shuffles all of your monsters back into your deck during the end phase, but this almost never comes up. And the reason it almost never comes up is because you're usually using Mischief of the Time Goddess during the same turn to skip to the battle phase of your next turn, skipping over the end phase where your monsters would be shuffled back into the deck. The goal of the deck is to OTK, or 1-turn kill your opponent. Technically, it's a 2-turn kill since Mischief of the Time Goddess is giving you a second turn to continue a battle phase in. But it's kind of like a 1-turn kill because your opponent isn't getting a turn in the middle of it. I'm using lots of cards that clear the way for the Valkyrie attacks, including Dark Hole, Raigeki, Lightning Storm, and Harpie's Feather Duster. I'm also using Dark Ruler No More to combo with the field clearers and rid monsters of their protection before wiping the board. I'm using most of the Valkyrie cards, but not all of them. Valkyrie Dritte is probably the best one since it gets any Valkyrie from your deck, including Ride of the Valkyries, which is a Valkyrie card. Valkyrie Vierte is a close second. It lets you special summon any Valkyrie from your deck when it's destroyed by battle, and also has an effect that lets you excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of other Valkyries you have, and add a normal spell from among them to your hand. This synergizes well with the deck since it uses all of those normal spells that clear the opponent's field, and uses cards like Ride of the Valkyries that get the deck going. If you use Mischief of the Time Goddess after using Valkyrie Vierte's effect, you can then use Valkyrie Vierte's effect again in main phase 2 of the turn that Mischief of the Time Goddess skips to. Valkyrie Sigrun is usually key to piling on damage and being able to wipe out your opponent. It also gives you access to some of your other Valkyrie effects. If Sigrun is special summoned, you get to special summon another Valkyrie from your hand or graveyard. There are plenty of cards in your deck that can special summon Valkyrie Sigrun, including Ride of the Valkyries, but it also has an effect that lets you special summon it from your hand by sending a face-up spell or trap card from your field to the graveyard. In this particular version of the deck, that's pretty much just Gozen Match, but if you build the deck differently, you can also use cards like Rivalry of Warlords or Valhalla Hall of the Fallen as a card to send to the graveyard to special summon Sigrun. Valkyrie Zweite and Valkyrie Erda are typically less useful, but are worth having access to with cards that can search them, like Valkyrie Dritte. Zweite destroys a monster if it's summoned. Valkyrie Erda reduces the attack points of all monsters on your opponent's field by 1,000 if it was special summoned by a Valkyrie card like Ride of the Valkyries. In addition, any card that your opponent has on the field that would be destroyed by battle or card effect gets banished instead as long as Erda is face up on your field. Valkyrie Sechste is pretty much a wild card for the deck. If it's special summoned, you get to special summon any other Valkyrie from your deck along with it. You can special summon it with Ride of the Valkyries, and then choose the Valkyrie you want from your deck to summon to your field. Since it's a level 1 monster, you can also special summon it with the 1-for-1 spell card and trigger its effect that way. In this version of the deck, I'm mostly sticking to using Valkyrie monsters, since you can't use Mischief of the Time Goddess if you control a non-Valkyrie monster. Controlling a non-Valkyrie monster and being unable to use Mischief of the Time Goddess can be a big problem, especially after you use Ride of the Valkyries, since Mischief of the Time Goddess is the key to skipping your end phase, so that your monsters don't shuffle back into the deck. In other versions of this deck, I tested out Diviner of the Herald to combo with Trias Hierarchia, and I also tested out Archlord Christia. I even tried using Condemned Witch with Forbidding Droplet. In the end, I opted for the build that doesn't rely on non-Valkyrie monsters, so I can pretty much always use Mischief of the Time Goddess. 3 cards I'm not using in this deck are Goddess Skull's Oracle, Goddess Verdande's Guidance, and Goddess Erd's Verdict. A lot of players like these cards because they can manipulate your opponent's draws, but I don't think it's quite worth it in Master Duel. In Master Duel, I just don't think that changing your opponent's draw is impactful enough to justify the space in the deck. In the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG, however, I would play the Valkyrie deck completely differently. I would use Mystic Mine in the deck to shut down my opponent from being able to use cards, and then use the 3 goddesses to remove my opponent's outs. If they can't get rid of your Mystic Mine, you'll eventually run them out of cards in their deck. And the effect of Valkyrie Sechste, which can actually send 2 cards from the top of your opponent's deck to the graveyard each turn, will help speed up the process of decking your opponent out. Since Mystic Mine is forbidden on Master Duel, it is not a viable strategy on here. Since there aren't any Valkyrie extra deck monsters, the extra deck really isn't that important to most victories with the deck. Just throw in a toolbox of cards and you should be good. The Baron de Fleur and the Elder Entity Nitz in the extra deck are from when I use Diviner of the Herald. If you're going to use Diviner of the Herald in your deck, you'll probably want to include those cards, because you can pretty easily synchro summon Baron de Fleur with your Diviner of the Herald since it's a tuner, and it's nice to have access to Elder Entity Nitz in case you want to just destroy a card after using your Diviner of the Herald's effect. Because the deck isn't that reliant on the extra deck, the 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance in the deck are also a natural fit. One card that I tried in the Valkyrie deck and actually really liked was Reasoning. The Valkyrie levels are all over the place, and pretty much every single one of them is a good hit with Reasoning. Unfortunately, it's kind of hard to use Reasoning in the same deck as Maxx and Ash Blossoming Joyous Spring, since you'll often special summon one of those monsters instead if you try to use Reasoning. So I ultimately cut the Reasonings in favor of Maxx and Ash Blossom. The Valkyrie deck honestly isn't that strong, and I think it would be very tough to achieve Diamond rank with it. But it is a lot of fun to play, and that's mostly because of Mischief of the Time Goddess. A lot of times you'll use Mischief of the Time Goddess, and your opponent will actually just freeze and stop playing while they try to figure out what's going on. If you found this Valkyrie guide helpful, I would really appreciate if you like this video and subscribe to my channel. If I get a lot of likes and subscriptions for the guides, I will create more guides like it for other decks. Now I'll show you the replays from different versions of this deck, from my Platinum 5 to Platinum 4 climb, and you'll see from the replays how fun it is to use this deck and how cool it is to use Mischief of the Time Goddess.